Our conversation continues here. Ron Kind is joining us at the table, Democrat of Wisconsin, Ways and Means Committee member. And you've seen the headlines in the papers this morning. So a deal emerging from the Senate to reopen the government until January 15th, raise the debt ceiling until February 7th. What do you make of it?
Hope springs eternal. Maybe we're close to a deal finally being announced this morning, and we need to. I mean, this hasn't been democracy's finest hour. I know there's a lot of dissatisfaction, discontent back home about the dysfunction coming out of Washington today, and we got to open up the government. We have to pay our bills as a great nation is expected to, and then we need to begin conversations on a long-term deficit reduction agreement to get our fiscal house in order. And if we can do those three things here, that would help restore some business and consumer confidence out there and hopefully get the economy back growing and creating the good-paying jobs that we need, which ought to be our #1 focus right now here in Washington, rather than the shutdown and the stalemate that we're getting.
What about the details of this deal? You've got Republicans saying the Democrats want to include a favor to the labor unions by repealing or delaying a $63 per person tax on existing insurance policies until 2015. Do you agree with that?
Well, we're going to hear more after the Senate has a chance to talk amongst their members. I know Senator McConnell is going to meet with his conference this morning and talk about the details of the plan. So it may be premature to be focusing on the specific elements right now, but you know, the idea of getting the government opening until next year again, raising the debt ceiling until mid-February buys us a little bit of time in order to do the tough lifting that needs to be done, and that's longer-term budget projections and what we can do to bring that under control. But I hope it's just not leaping from crisis to crisis here, Greta. That's the last thing we can do to the U.S. economy and to the psyche of this nation, is have government by short-term measures, which will only maintain the uncertainty, wondering whether or not we're going to face another short shutdown within a couple of months, or perhaps defaulting on our financial responsibilities for the first time in our nation's history and possibly becoming a deadbeat nation, which would be, I think, catastrophic for the U.S. economy.
You're a moderate Democrat. A lot in the papers today about this moderate group in the Senate of 12 senators who have drafted this deal, a deal from the middle for the middle. Right. What have you been doing behind the scenes as a moderate Democrat?
Well, my good friend Charlie Dent from Pennsylvania and I were able to get a bipartisan group of members of the House over the last couple of weeks to start talking and meeting with each other regularly and start coming up with some solutions to find a pathway out of the stalemate and offering that to our leadership on both sides. It was really those talks over the last couple of weeks, I think, that provided the impetus of this so-called Gang of 12 in the Senate to really pick it up and to continue those bipartisan discussions. And, you know, that's what the American people expect us to be doing, not being afraid to enter the same room together, sit down and honestly talk and listen to each other to see if there is some common ground and if there is a path forward to make government function a little bit more efficiently. So the group is still meeting, and we're going to continue to talk, as we will throughout this crisis, the shutdown and possible default. But it's a group that's going to have to continue to meet on the longer-term budget challenges that we're facing, because if this place is only driven by the political extreme, either the far right or the far left, you're going to get more of this performance that we've had the last couple of weeks. So I think more pragmatic members need to start coming together and getting to know each other, and build up the trust, which is lacking around here, and learn how we can walk together before we can start running again.
So this proposal coming from this group of 12 senators.
Yeah.
The question is this morning, can it pass the House? What do you think? I mean, you've been working behind the scenes to try to come up with some proposal that could pass the House. So does this do it?
Well, the question really is, does Speaker Boehner bring the Senate proposal before the House for a full vote? If he does, I'm confident we'll have the votes. It may be a little bit lopsided in that, but we'll wait and see, again, what the details are. I think there's a little bit in it that each party can point to and claim victory, and obviously that's important around here. But it's really going to depend on the Speaker, who controls the floor schedule and what he allows up for consideration and how long it takes. The clock is ticking. Obviously, October 17th, this Thursday, is just 2 days away, and that's when we run out of the ability to pay our bills and could technically start falling into default. And then the consequences of that could cascade pretty quickly. So I think that's the real question, is whether the Speaker will pick up what the Senate may be able to do here in the next couple of days and allow an up and down vote in the House and let the House of Representatives work its will.
So that means House Democrats would line up for this bill and help the Speaker out with this?
I think so. I think, we've been asking for an opportunity to get the government up and fully functioning again. We've been concerned about the possibility of defaulting on our financial responsibilities. But it's not going to be the perfectly clean bill, I think, that most Democrats have been demanding, including the president. But seldom do you get the perfect bill around here, and hopefully it's close enough to receive support so we can get back to regular order and the regular business of legislating again.
One thing that you and Charlie Dent wanted, a Republican of Pennsylvania, is to repeal the medical device tax that was included in the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be on the table anymore.
Yeah, you know, we focused on that because there's been wide bipartisan agreement, both the House and the Senate. Earlier this year, 79 senators voted to repeal the device tax because it is bad policy. It's a tax on all revenue, not just profits. That will especially hurt new startup manufacturing companies in this country. Those businesses that rely on innovation to be successful, they need more capital at those early stages for R&D investment and hopefully discovering the next great thing that could lead to more cost savings in the healthcare system. And there's been wide bipartisan support in the House for doing it too. But what we've talked about is paying for it. So we're not also contributing to the deficit. And that's kind of a whole new discussion around here when it comes to repealing that device tax.
This is what the Washington Post editorial board says about that this morning. If the main outcome of the crisis is to suspend the medical device tax or other healthcare revenue measures, Washington will have proved only that making the deficit worse remains its basis for bipartisan agreement. Other critics of repealing the device tax say it's a $30 billion giveaway to one of the more profitable companies in this country.
Well, I think there's a distinct. First of all, our group, bipartisan group in the House, have been talking about pay for it. And we're offering suggestions on how to pay for it. So we're not contributing to the deficit at the end of the day. And that in itself is a major breakthrough, having those type of discussions. But I think there's a distinction to be made, too, between those what are called pre-revenue companies and the larger companies. And it's really the pre-revenue companies that are being taxed before they earn their first dollar. And that's going to make it very difficult for them to survive. So I think policy-wise, there's a reason why there's overwhelming bipartisan support for looking at the device tax, maybe going back and correcting it. Listen, I supported the Affordable Care Act. I didn't do it because I believed it was a perfect bill and that it shouldn't be touched. I think we need to learn what's working, what isn't working, and be able to make fixes and changes to it along the way. That's the only way health care reform is ultimately going to work. So to my colleagues who say you can't touch the Affordable Care Act, it's the new third rail here, I don't believe